Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about the Xul Rework. We're going to be going through every talent and ability as if all of them are new talents or abilities, and then we are going to talk about what his current playstyle is and where that might shift into his future playstyle. And then finally we're going to do a couple predictions on what builds we might think could be good. I've been right on these predictions in the past, and I've been wrong on these predictions in the past. I would say so far I've been more right than wrong, but who knows? I will take a few guesses, and we can kind of go from there, see which ones you like, if you like certain playstyles. With that being said, let's get right into it. The reason I'm going to explain each of the abilities in this case, you guys have never played Xul. He's a hero that was very underplayed. He was only picked in niche situations in the past meta where he was used as a double soaker, as he was one of the best double soakers in the game. Wipe a wave, go to a different lane, wipe a wave, go to a different lane, and continue that process on because he would summon these skeletons that would make that very, very efficient. Let me remove the enemy hero so I can kind of show you what the old process was. Is you would go up to a wave like this, pop your cursed strikes, which would allow you to swipe. You would summon a bunch of minions that would then go, and they would tank the towers for your minions so that your minions would have more time to then attack the structures, allowing you to go to another wave and start pushing in this wave. Once you killed this wave, you would have enough time to get back up to the first lane again and wipe this wave one more time. Every time that you would do this on Xul, you would push more than any other hero in the game, because the reason that you're going to be pushing more is because you're always going to have a full health minion wave while your minions would go do damage to the structure. This was really efficient, and it was something that he could do very, very well. Well, that playstyle still exists, but now he's a little bit less linear. Xul is going to have more playstyles and more options during team fights. One other use that he was used in the past is in a very specific build where you would go and heal for a huge portion of your health with almost an indefinite cleaving attack. And that build looked something along the lines of this. And let's just say that this is the build that you went with, and again, it wasn't exactly like this, but this will give you a pretty good idea. And let me take a bunch of damage so you can see the amount of healing that is available in this build. So this is what the tank build was on Xul, and it was a tank because you had such high sustained healing, because you were able to heal and lower the cooldown of your swipe to where you could constantly be attacking very, very quickly, gaining all of your life back, and keep this going for the entire time. The amount of DPS you could do is incredibly high as long as the enemy team is staying near you. Well, this build still exists, and it is still a possibility, but he does have kind of a different tank build if you are going against more bursty teams rather than sustained teams. And with all of that in mind, those were his old playstyles. Let's talk about his current talents and abilities. Let's reset talents onto his abilities. Bone Armor. Now, Bone Armor is a ability that he gets just off the bat. It's something that you can activate. You don't need to take a talent for it, but there are talents for it. You activate it, you gain a shield equal to 25% of your health, which in this case is 1200 at this level, and then it lasts for 3 seconds. It's a decent way to survive some burst and to take more favorable trades against certain people in the lane if you happen to be in a solo lane against a single opponent. Then you have Spectral Scythe. Summon a scythe that travels to Xul after 1 second. It looks like this. It will spawn, and then it will travel towards you. If you move back, it will continue traveling towards you, as a lot of the boomerang effects in this game do. This ability, if you want to play it out, you will normally mount up. If you're going against someone in lane that you just need to poke, you'll move close to them, you will activate it right behind them, and you will run away. One thing that this ability does now that it didn't do in the past is it will summon one skeleton defender for each person that you hit. For example, if you were to hit 3 enemies, you will summon 3 skeletal defenders, which is the max amount of skeletal defenders that you will have. They will attack the closest enemy to them, and that is how Spectral Scythe works. It does a decent amount of damage, and it has a pretty reasonable cooldown. It's, I would say, okay for poke, but it's certainly not going to poke as much as a Li Ming or a Chromie, but it will do a decent amount for a bruiser. Think something along the lines of Thrall's Chain Lightning. It's a reasonable amount of poke, but nothing too crazy. His next attack is, or ability is Cursed Strikes, or Cursed Strikes. Your basic attacks will now cleave, and they will reduce the attack speed of the heroes that get hit by it. And it's a really cool ability because it allows you to kind of destroy any frontline bruisers that you're going against during team fights. Because most of the fights, you'll go in, you'll attack their frontline, and their tank, as well as all of their frontline, like an Imperius or Urel, will start attacking at 40% slower. This is also great for frontliners like Artanis or Illidan, because you'll be reducing their damage and some of their other abilities. Because remember that Artanis and Illidan gain extra values from auto attacks. Illidan will lower his cooldown and heal from it, and Artanis will lower the cooldown of his shield. So if you're lowering the attack speed of certain heroes, you're also lowering their healing as well. Then you go on to Bone Prison. After 2 seconds, you will deal a decent amount of single target damage, not really anything to worry about. Then you will root someone for 1.75 seconds. All nearby skeletal warriors will fixate on the target for the duration. So for example, if we were to use a Q and an E, all of your skeletal defenders will then change targets and go to attack the same target. If you take a quick peek at this, total damage to a single target, once all of this is done, and they all explode, total damage to a single target will be about 2,500, give or take, because of all of those extra minions and that extra damage. That's not bad, seeing as a bruiser has about 5,000 health at this level, which means that an assassin will have probably about 3,500. So just doing a quick Q and an E on one set of targets could easily do about 70% of that person's health in the right situations. Your ultimate abilities we will talk about when we get to level 10, and the skeletons we will just explain really quickly that when minions die, you summon a skeletal warrior. When you land a Q, you summon a skeletal warrior. These skeletal warriors deal damage, and then they also explode on death. Up to 3 skeletal warriors can be active at once, and when they're spawned this way anyways. So there may be more able to be spawned in other methods. So for example, I will summon 3 right here. And then I'm going to go use a Q and see if we can summon more than 3. But they might have timed out by the time we do this. So yes, so we had 1 over here and 3 over here. So you can actually summon as many as you want through Q, and only 3 through the method of the actual minions dying. So one more time, let's actually just toggle cooldowns, and we'll see if we can summon more than 3 through this process. And yes, we can. Oh no, we can't. Nope, we can only summon 3 through this process. So, you can only ever have 3 out. That answers that question. Apologize for the misinformation. On to his talents. Level 1 are all talents that will be upgrading your bone armor. With Shade, upgrading it's where you will evade all basic attacks, so it's great against someone like an Illidan, but it will increase your cooldown to 40 seconds. Backlash will make it to where when it expires, you do 12% of maximum health. This used to be used as a little bit of a burst tool in trades, because remember I said in the solo lane you might be trading against one person. So people used to use this method so that they would pop this, use their root, they would walk in and do a quick burst of damage onto someone. You can see it's a huge burst of damage that can quickly do a nice trade onto someone. Then you can walk away right after the explosion, so you end up okay. And then finally, Shackler. Shackler is, while bone armor is active, nearby enemies are slowed by 35% for 1 second. Basic attacks against the heroes that are stunned, rooted, or slowed reduce the cooldown of bone armor. In the build that I showed before, this was a tool to slow everyone and lower the cooldown of your bone armor very quickly. So I will show you one more time quickly what this build looks like and how this could really keep the cooldown of your bone armor really low. So for example, it's a 3-second cooldown. If we were to pop the W and start getting the faster attack speed, watch what happens with the cooldown of this. We quickly shave off the cooldown to the point that there's no cooldown on the slow and there's no cooldown on the bone armor, making this to where one of the best tools against very sustained damage teams, because you're constantly having that bone armor and constantly lowering the cooldown of that bone armor. So you can see the value of that talent in perfect scenarios, but again, you're rarely going to hit those perfect scenarios. That's the level 1 talents for that. In this case, we're going to be taking Backlash, as that's the most reliable talent for catching people out of position. But Shackler's also a really good talent. Level 4. Reaper's Toll. Reduce the cooldown of Spectral Scythe, and it gives you some mana back. So instead of it taking 55 mana, it takes 40 mana, and then it also will lower the cooldown. This is going to allow you to summon more skeletons during team fights, rather than relying on anything else. Grim Scythe. This is the increase your attack damage and lower the cooldown. You saw how we were able to just keep the cooldown going indefinitely? Well, there's something about this, is that this is each enemy hit. This is not each enemy hero hit. So if we take this, we don't need to hit heroes. We can simply go up to a wave, press a swipe, and you can see the cooldown is nullified, making this talent a very valuable talent for even just doing camps. If you need to quickly do a camp, you can reposition to where all of the minions are attacking you, and then you can quickly swipe to lower the cooldown, and you're indefinitely swiping. So feel free to just leave this on, and it can really speed up the rate that you're doing camps because you have those swipes going at all times. Feel free to activate your bone armor so that you can mitigate some of the damage that you take, and you can finish it off with a Q or extra swipes, allowing you to quickly do bruiser camps as early as level 4. Let's go back to level 4 talents, and finally we have Jailers. Jailers makes it to where Bone Prison summons 2 Skeletal Warriors. These do not count towards Xul's raised skeleton maximum, so you can go up to 5 Skeletal Warriors with this talent. If you summoned 80 Skeletal Warriors, you get the reward. While fixating on an enemy Skeletal Warrior's gain 40% movement speed and attack speed. So if you're going a skeletal build, this is a really great tool to doing a lot of damage to a single target. So it could look something like this. Let's complete the quest, and let's summon a bunch of these, and then let's send them all up here. So now we have 4 attacking, and look at our DPS to a single target is around 550 DPS. That means in just a few seconds, you will be able to take out an assassin, and honestly, this will do a decent amount to a tank. Catch a tank out of position, you're doing about 6,000 damage. So, I mean, we need to subtract 2 hits of Q, but still, it could be a decent amount of damage. So those are your talents at level 4. Level 7, you have Harvest Vitality. This is where I was able to heal so much when I was using my Cursed Strikes. You have Trog Owl's or Trogul's Essence, Skeletal Warriors, Attack, Restore, Health, and Mana. Remember, these are hitting just an enemy. This doesn't need to hit a hero, and it will give you back maximum health and maximum mana. This was one of the talents that was picked up a lot of times if you were only worrying about double soaking the entire game, because this allowed you to always use all of your abilities and gain all of your mana back. And if they tried to stop you while you were double soaking, you just gained all of your life back as well. Finally, Wall of Bones. Increases the shield amount of bone armor to 35% and gives you spell armor. If you could combine that with Grim Scythe and Shackler, you're going to notice that you're going to be able to have your shield going for a long time against frontline enemies. But again, that's a perfect scenario, and it's very rare that it'll come out. Normally, you're going to want to go with that extra healing so that you can survive while your shield is not up. In this case, we're just going to take Dragul's Essence just to make it a little bit easier as we're moving through. Poison Nova recently got a buff. What Poison Nova does is it will make it to where you fire off a big AoE that will do poison damage over all of the enemies that are hit. This poison damage is a pretty decent amount overall. I mean, the overtime of this is 1,381 damage to all enemies hit over 10 seconds. Effectively, that is about 1/4 of my life as a bruiser, and it'll likely hit the majority of the people in a fight that you go around. This was kind of outclassed by his other talent because the Frost Mages tended to do more damage over time, as well as they would also slow, and they would create targets that would be a little annoying for people, and you can really split up a fight. So to take a look at what that talent does, let's quickly throw in some talents, and it is vector targeted, which means that you will pick the location of the middle and then you will go out in a direction so you know where you want it to go. For example, if you want to block off this zone, you could quickly do this. So if they need to walk through, they need to walk through 4 Skeletal Mages as they go through it. Each of these Skeletal Mages will be slowing them and attacking them. So let's toggle cooldowns one more time. And we're going to summon the Skeletal Warriors in the middle of this fight so that you can see what they do. They all fire off at the nearest enemy, and they will slow them whenever they hit them. They continue attacking until they either die because they have health, or until they time out from their health being slowly drained away. This does a lot of damage. So if we were to look at both of these talents, it does almost a similar amount to Poison Nova. Poison Nova is just a little bit faster as far as damage goes, and Skeletal Mages can die. Level 13. Echoes of Death. Spectral Scythe spawn 2 additional scythes next to the first after 1.5 seconds, dealing 60% damage. Just so you know, these scythes will also summon the extra minions, so is going to be a very easy way to build up a set of minions during fights if you are in the Q build. And then we have Rapid Harvest. Gain 5% attack speed for 3 seconds up to 75%. We've seen the power of that in the past, how fast you can attack and the high DPS that you get from that, as long as there are frontliners to attack. And finally, we have Amplified Damage. Increase the root duration of Bone Prison by 0.25 seconds. Enemies rooted will lose 25 armor. This is an amazing talent if you have a team that's coordinated, where you call out the root target, and then it's going to summon a minion or two if you have the other talents, but at the same time, it's going to allow your team to focus on that set. It's going to be difficult to really choose which one to pick in a summons build because you want to be summoning more things. But at the same time, it would be nice to summon 2 extra things if you're going the other version of this and do all that damage to that target. Level 16. You have Decrepify. Spectral Scythe will slow people, and the Skeletal Warriors will slow people, meaning that you're going to be able to activate this, you're going to slow someone, and then the Spectral Warriors are also going to slow someone. This will be a great talent to chase someone down that you're attacking and really take them out with the rest of your abilities. Then we have Weaken, Cursed Strikes. Skeletal Warriors will reduce damage dealt, so if you're on a fight that's standing still and you don't need that slow, you could essentially be a Leoric for the entire team. Not only will you be able to weaken them with these, but you'll also be weakening maybe the backline by summoning some minions into the backline while you're weakening their front line as well. Overall, this is a really powerful talent, and it's going to be really insane. I mean, you could lower the damage of almost entire teams. And finally, we have Bone Spear, which was kind of the old pick just because the level 16 talents that he had before weren't that great. And it just is a activatable that does a really good chunk of damage. Level 20, we have the first option. Let's go through and pick Poison Nova. The first option increases, Poison Nova heals for 50% of the damage dealt, and its duration is increased. So if you activate Poison Nova and you hit people, you are now going to be healing for the damage dealt, and its duration is going to be longer, so it goes further out, and it's just a really powerful option. So you can see the amount of healing that we have here. We can take a huge amount of damage and just heal through it. Because of that extra duration, that extra healing on those targets. So it's a cool option. Is it really that good? I don't know, because he has some other great options at 20. Let's go into the Skeletal Mage option. The Skeletal Mage makes it to where you increase the slow of the Frost Mages, as well as every 5th Spectral Scythe that hits an enemy spawns a Frost Mage instead of a Skeletal Warrior. So just to make this a little bit easier, let's go switch over the talents to a Q build. So for a Q build, we're likely going to be taking Backlash, Reapers, doesn't really matter here, but let's say we go with this. We go into Skeletal Mages, followed by Echoes of Death, and then Decrepify so we can slow people, and then we'll go with Cold Hand of Death. Now we're going to be activating our Q, and we're going to be summoning a bunch of these using Qs. We're going to have a lower cooldown on our Q, so we're going to be able to reposition during fights, and we're going to be summoning Skeletal Mages that are going to be slowing people as well. This is going to be a really neat way to summon a bunch of extra minions, and... oh no, these minions aren't counted towards it. Look, we have 4 of these. Maybe that's a bug, because we didn't have 4 earlier. But put simply, this is what you're going to be able to do in team fights, because this is not with toggled cooldowns. This is just simply throwing Qs out and hitting people. This build is surprisingly good. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be that good. But yeah, this could be really powerful. It's a high DPS during long fights. It'll be great for, like, Volskaya on later levels. So you'll definitely want Trog'Gul's Essence so that you will be summoning, or you will be healing off of all that damage as well. Because we're going to be healing and gaining mana back throughout that entire time that we have all of those minions. That's pretty neat. I wasn't expecting it to be that strong. It's going to be hard not to take Mortal Wound, though, because reducing the healing by 75% was a really powerful talent. So I think this will likely be one of the possible builds, which is going to be the Q build, and it's also going to be effectively one of the summons build. In the early portions of the game, you'll be queuing just to summon 1 or 2 minions. Then you'll be gaining your life back, so you'll be a kind of a force to be reckoned with in the solo lane. And then you'll have Skeletal Mages for team fights, as well as throwing out multiple Qs during fights to increase your damage and summon more minions. And then finally, you'll be slowing everyone But you really don't even need this talent. You could actually go with Weaken here if you want to, because you're going to be summoning so many Skeletal Warriors that you could safely just Weaken instead of going for the slows. But slows or Weaken are definitely options, and then finally Cold Hand of Death will be a pretty good power spike. This build will seem pretty good for maps where people have to sit still for a while. You'll be able to land a lot of Qs. I would say maps like Volskaya, where you still get the benefits of double soaking on Xul, but then you can join in with your group and still have a decent team fight. It's really powerful in the later levels, but it seems a little weaker in the earlier levels. Let's take a peek at another possible build right now. Let's finish up with the level 20 talents. Mortal Wound reduces healing by 75% for who gets hit by your Q. This is really good if you're in a build that you hit Bone Prison, your team's willing to follow up, then you hit with a Spectral Scythe, they can't get healed and they die. And then we have Colon's Edict, Skeleton Warriors reduce heroic cooldown. Alright, let's get into the summons build. So the summons build will likely be a build that we're going to go with. It doesn't really matter, but let's say Shackler for now. Then you're going to go with Jailers. Your goal with the summons build is to have these summons that are going to be moving faster, doing more damage, and you can summon those when you use your Bone Prison. Now, after that, we are going to likely be taking Tragul's Essence so that our summons will be healing us. And then at this point, it really depends on what you want to go for. Because we're going with summons, would probably just go with more summons, just because that's the whole gimmick of the build. But I could see how Poison Nova could be valuable for this. It doesn't really matter because at level 20, we're likely going to be taking Colon's Edict. So it's whichever one you're going to really need. I'm going to take Skeletal Mages just to give you more disruption during these fights. Then, again, this is up to you. None of these are really going to be that valuable. Echoes of Death is going to allow you to summon more things, while Amplified Damage is going to allow all of your targets to be doing 25% extra damage on the one that you're focusing on. So if you summon 3 skeletons, which you can do relatively easy by doing a Q and an E on one target, then all of yours are going to be doing 40% more damage from this, and they'll be doing 20% more damage from this. But ultimately, I would rather just summon more minions at this point. At this level, because we're summoning a ton of minions, I'd like to go with Weaken, so we can weaken the enemies that are all getting attacked by our Skeletal Warriors. And then finally, I'd go with Colon's Edict. So the way that this build would work is you'd start off a fight with an ultimate, and then you would likely go into using a Q, and then lowering the damage of the enemies, firing off an E root so that you can hit something, and then your goal is to use all of these summoned minions that you have, as well as summoning more minions with your Q, to then lower the cooldown of your ultimate ability so that when the first one drops, you have a second one out. And at this point, you're in a pretty good spot to just drop whatever you want to. And you have a very low cooldown on Bone Armor because you're going to be attacking targets that are slowed from your Skeletal. And then you can just keep summoning these. Remember, this is without cooldowns and or without toggling cooldowns. You're doing a lot. Team fights are going to be a mass of just summoning things, and your cooldowns are super low. So continue just summoning minions as much as possible, and continue making sure that you've got your Skeletal Warriors going out, activating your Bone Armor whenever you have the chance, and overall, you'll do a good 70,000 damage before you run out of mana. So mana really won't be your limiting factor. It's really going to come down to health, but you're going to have that extra 25% quite often, activating that with those cooldown reductions. I think this is going to be a very powerful build. And again, this is even without the extra 40% attack speed. So this is a summons build. It'll be very powerful for team fights, and it's an amazing build for double soaking because you still get all of the benefits of Jailers charging in, increasing your healing and everything from there. So this is that build that I would recommend for that. Finally, let's talk about the 2 tank builds. We're going to go through it really quickly. I'm going to go over the old tank build. I mean, we've talked about it before, but Shackler's Grim Scythe into Harvest Vitality, into Skeletal Mages, which in this case, I would say Poison Nova could be an option because of that extra healing over time now when you're CC'd. So that's an option, but I still want to go Skeletal Mages so people don't run away as easily. At this level, you want to go Rapid Harvest, so you do that high DPS and W build. And then finally, Weaken is just might as well because... But actually, this might be where you would shift it around so you can keep up with people. But I would say if you're taking Skeletal Mages, you can keep up. So we'd go with Weaken. And then at this point, normally in the tank build, you would end up taking Mortal Wound so that you can lower the healing of the enemies. But you could also upgrade this. I just don't think it's going to be as valuable if you're not casting a bunch of Qs because you're not going to be summoning a bunch of stuff. So I would say Mortal Wound would be the best choice for this tank build. And this is going to be essentially tank build 1, which is again sustained damage. And I wouldn't ever main tank. I mean, unless your team's really into it, I wouldn't main tank Xul because he still has the problems that a lot of other main tanks answer, like mobility gap closers, stuff like that. Your root, they're likely going to get pretty far away before your root lands, so you don't have a guaranteed engage. But on maps like Volskaya or Sky Temple, where people have to fight on points, it's okay. But yeah, so this is essentially the W build, tank build, and it's really good against sustained damage because you heal through so much damage. And that's going to be the first tank build. The second tank build is just kind of a guess on if this might actually work. But if you have high sustained healing on your team and you're going against burst, I would recommend trying Shackler into... We're going to go with... I'm not 100% sure what we want to go with this one yet. The lowered cooldown would be pretty reasonable, but let's say... Because what's the goal from this, right? Our goal is to trigger Wall of Bones a lot. So we're going to go with Grim Scythe at this level so we can keep a low cooldown on our W, which is going to keep a low cooldown on our Shackler. So we're going to go with Grim Scythe. Then we're going to go with Wall of Bones. And then we're going to go with Poison Nova so that we have that sustained healing if we do get to level 20. That'll answer Burst and Sustain. Then at this level, it's up to you. I would say we're probably going Amplified Damage so we can burst down targets that we're focusing on. So we would go with Amplified Damage. And then finally, we would want to go with Weaken so we take less damage. But Decrepify could be an option, but we're probably just going to go with Weaken. And then finally, you'd want to go with either this if you do need that sustained healing, or Mortal Wound if you want to kill the target you're going for. In this case, I'm going to assume that we picked this because we already had Sustain. I'm going to go with Mortal Wound. So the goal of this build is, at the start of a fight, you're going to want to root something. And if you do have this slow, which we don't have, your team's gonna try to kill that. So you're going to try to land your root and the scythe at the same time. You're gonna call out your target and you're gonna say, guys, I'm looking at targets on me. Or let's say that this is Artanis. I don't know why we'd be focusing Artanis. Let's say it's Malthael. Let's say, guys, I'm focusing on Malthael. You're going to then hit him with a root, and you're going to use your Q. You're going to lower his healing by 75%, lower his armor by 25%, and he's going to get dropped very quickly. You alone are going to be able to add 2,500 damage to that burst, and then your team's also going to be able to add a lot of burst as well. So whatever you call out is going to die very, very quickly. And then after that, once you kill something, your goal is just to keep that giant bone armor going as long as possible. So you're going to activate this, and you're going to lower the cooldown of it very quickly, and boom, you're going to have that 35 armor up, or that 35% armor up almost all the time, because you're going to be slowing people and you're going to be having that giant shield up over and over and over. You'll have your activatable to increase the extra damage that you're bringing out, but overall this is just going to be a very anti-burst build. You survive the burst, you lower the cooldown of your shield, and you go from there. And those are really the 4 builds that I think are a possibility out of Xul. You've got the Q build, you've got the summon build, you've got the 2 different tank builds, the W tank build, and this anti-burst, pick a target, kill that target build. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, as far as health goes, you're pretty close to the health of a Varian at level 20, a taunt Varian. And you can taunt from a further range. I mean, I guess not really. It starts out as essentially a melee range, but it lasts longer than taunt. Taunt lasts for 1.25 seconds, this lasts for 2 seconds, and it'll also lower their armor. So it's kind of like a taunt plus Colossal Smash, just on a delay. So that could be a really good option for the Training Wheels build. And this is kind of a weird, janky build, it seems like, but it could really work out if the competitive scene wanted to use Xul as a setup for their team. And so that's really what Xul's looking like right now. I think my favorite build is likely going to be the Summons build, though. The new Summons build, I mean, the amount of summons you could bring out is just crazy, and it still brings you a lot of power in the early game with that double soak, to the point that I'm wondering if that build might be a tiny bit overpowered. But hey, we'll see. I have no idea. Can't really take the guesses yet. I'd love to see all these builds in the game, see which ones end up coming out ahead of the other builds. But overall, which build are you guys the most excited about? Let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, have fun, try them out. And if you've already tried out some, I'd love to hear about it. Thank you guys so much.